Well, hello and welcome to our ISE Fireside webinar. We have a great program planned for everybody today, and we're going to be talking about maximize cyber defense ROI through unified mitigation of attack surface exposure risk. That's a mouthful, but it's a real great topic for us to cover today. We're pleased to have Vulcan Cyber as our sponsor. Many thanks to Vulcan Cyber. We're very appreciative of our partnership with them, and we've got a great program plan, as I mentioned. So let's just jump into our agenda. We'll kick things off with our panelist introductions, and we have two great panelists for everyone to meet today. And then we'll hear a little bit from our sponsor, Vulcan Cyber, and we'll jump into our panel discussions. And we love to hear from you as well with the Q&A session. So we'll have live Q&A on air. We kindly ask that you let us know what you're thinking with the Q&A in the Q&A chat window. So as you think of that question, go ahead and ask it, and we will answer as many questions as possible on air. And then we'll sign off at about 2:50, giving you a few minutes for your 3 o'clock meeting. We also would like to invite everybody to fill out the survey, which will allow us to know that you need your CPE credit, and we'll send that over to you, a letter via email certifying that you were with us for that program, our program today. So let's go ahead and get started on our panelist introductions. Yaniv, actually, I'm going to start with Jeremy. Jeremy, would you go ahead and introduce yourself? And you were our ISE West winner last year, and I'm going to have some special announcements about that event coming up. So Jeremy, take it away.
All right, well, thank you, Marci. So I'm Jeremy Smith. I'm the Information Security Officer for Avery Dennison. Avery Dennison is a Fortune 500 manufacturing company. Our headquarters is in Ohio, but we have locations in over 50 countries and have 200 locations around the globe. And our specialization is really in adhesives, tags, labels, and we're the largest kind of RFID manufacturer in the world. And I have a global team and look forward to the discussion today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And Yaniv, good to have you here all the way from Tel Aviv.
That's right. Thank you, Marci. Always fun to be here with the ISE organization. First time digitally or online that I'm doing this. I will say that the picture of me is really nice. I need to know where you got it because I don't have it.
So, your marketing people.
I'll talk to them. It's good to know that it exists. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Yaniv. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vulcan Cyber. Been in this industry for 16 years. I'm both in public service in the Israeli military in a small notorious unit called 8200. Did some cool stuff there. And then spent another 10 years in the realm, first 5 years in cyber education, and then 6 years in Vulcan. Vulcan is a continuous threat and exposure management company. And what we do in short is that we help companies control their vulnerability management, application security, or any kind of risk program. We help reduce risk by bringing data together and aligning all of the inventory, vulnerabilities, owners of vulnerabilities in your organization in one place, driving the process automatically and hopefully providing governance. We work with more than 100 enterprise customers around the world and growing. We're growing quite quickly. And I can say that I take pride, and also what I love most about my job is these interactions directly with executives in this industry. I've been to the ISE East in Florida or Atlanta. Where was I think?
Atlanta. It was Atlanta a couple weeks
ago. Too many travels already. 2 weeks? No, more. 4 weeks. 4 weeks ago or something like that. And I really enjoyed it. So I'm also happy to be here, both to talk a bit and also learn. So thank you, Marci and team, for giving us this opportunity to speak today. And thank you, Jeremy, for spending the time with me in this panel.
Well, wonderful. We appreciate you. And yes, traveling the last few days have been a little bit tricky for some of us overall, but we are still getting around here and there.
We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it as well.
Oh, good. I think we definitely need to, because a lot of folks are trying to work through some of those challenges. But let's first just sort of kick things off and talk about the key challenges around vulnerability management. Many enterprises out there are, despite these significant investments, are really struggling with the legacy type of vulnerability management systems, and they're not mitigating the risks, overall, and it's impacting their business. There's a lot of manual tasks. There's a lot of complex attack services, conflicting priorities, and just, we're all feeling it with limited resources across the board. So we've got to look at some new ways, overall to manage and have some better efficient outcomes overall. And really, I think we've got to look at ways to challenge the status quo. And as security leaders, that's, what we're tasked to do. But this is what we're going to kind of cover today. So, Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. Our threat landscape out there, it's kind of mind-boggling, and I don't really get hung up on the FUD. But when you really think about some of the spawning of even just with the recent CrowdStrike outage of the increased threat landscape and just the everyday nation states that are out there and the threat actors that are getting more and more sophisticated with utilizing AI against us, we really do need to think about some robust strategies to counter these vulnerabilities. So what are you seeing today as the primary challenges that overall with our current vulnerability management systems?
Yeah, thanks, Marci. So we've actually looked into this kind of continuous threat management as a company starting maybe about a year ago, and realized that kind of the traditional vulnerability management, we even actually changed the name of our team to exposure management from vulnerability management. And where it started was just kind of the traditional vulnerability management of scanning systems, looking at CVEs and trying to patch everything is just not feasible. There's too many types of systems out there. In manufacturing, there's unique situations where we can't patch everything because sometimes even the companies don't support the most latest patches. So what we really had to do is realize that we had to go to prioritization, figure out where the biggest risks are, and really focus on those. That's not to say we don't patch every Windows system in IT on a regular basis, but really focusing on understanding the assets we have. That was critical, understanding what is our attack surface area. We didn't really have a great sense of our CMDB was notoriously pretty poor quality. So focus on getting much better asset information, and then really start on looking at our whole vulnerability management as exposure management. So it may not be a CVE, it may be a misconfiguration, and it tied to both internal assets as well as our cloud assets and our external exposure. So it was really a shift in mindset around kind of the traditional scanning, looking at CVEs and patching everything, to prioritization, as well as looking at the highest risks. And just looking basically at what your company and what you're looking at accomplishing, it seems like you're pretty focused directly in this space, and really interested to see how you think of the problem.
Yeah, so I think there are two just as maybe basics to this conversation. I think that what we are all now in this tidal wave of looking at what happened with CrowdStrike, and there it was a regular IT or product update that led to this. And we need to remember that the biggest constraint on the vulnerability management program is actually that we are not fixing things quickly or as quickly as we would like to, because we are afraid to cause business disruption. And this is the core difference in this program. When we are acting on risk versus when we are acting on incidents, we are not powerful, we are powerless, and we always have to operate through enterprise proxies. We always have to work through someone in IT, someone in development, someone in the cloud organization, someone in other admins of some platforms or whatever, and ask them to take care of the uptime while they fix. And this creates this tension between the amount of work that we have that is just growing and growing because we are adapting new technologies, that each and every one of these poses new types of risks, new types of problems, bigger inventory, and so on, as well as we as information security folks are never the ones that can act upon the problems that we see. We have to ask people. And I think that once we realize that these two constraints, we don't want to break things and we always have to work through proxies, we can design our programs in a way that will optimize on efficiency of remediation in a form that takes these two arguments under consideration. Obviously, no one wants to experience something like we've experienced over the past couple of days. And then we don't want to experience that because this is not really an information security driven action, but it's an information security responsibility of the product. I'm sure many people here that are CrowdStrike customers had faced some scrutiny because of this. Although, you know, one and I'm one of them might claim that CrowdStrike had saved multiple other hours of downtime and incident response investments throughout their deployment. And we need to make sure that we, at least as we drive these programs that are very sensitive, are aware of these constraints and arguments and avoid these things and operate in the right direction. This is, to me, is the basics of how we build the platform. And then the next step is already how to optimize based on these constraints and make sure that technology can empower process. I'm going to talk a lot about this because this program is not first technology, it's first process. Technology enables process, not process enables technology in this case. This is really, really, really important in these programs.
Well, let's sort of dive into this a little bit more, because what I'm hearing is twofold: conflicting priorities and a lot of manual tasks. So when you have that happening, you're stepping all over each other and you're not sure who's in charge. So clearly you kind of use what just happened to, over the weekend. It was a conflicting priority because, pushing out a patch was automated. It wasn't fully tested, overall, but it people lost control of the system because it was just part of the automation. And then the reality is the aftermath of the whole thing, the manual nature of actually getting up and running was pretty extraordinary, if not mind-boggling overall. So with these increased threats that are out there, I mean, that was not only being down, but the vulnerability, the landscape, and then the aftermath. So I'd like to kind of unpack some of the aftermath of what we're seeing, because you're seeing these different sites up there that are trying to do fake class action lawsuits, or disruption, things of and ransomware, and just the fact that your guardrails were completely down for a number of time, and you were giving to get restored. You were giving administrator encrypted passwords to your clerks, just as an example. So I'd love to sort of talk through a little bit of that. I know we're, but these are seeing things in action right now, and this is putting a lot of great technology like yours to the test of remediating and moving forward. So Jeremy or Yaniv, you want to sort of talk to either of the manual nature or just the
well, I mean, so we're a CrowdStrike customer. I can tell a little bit about our experience. First off, me waking up at 1 a.m. on Friday morning to 100 factories being down. That was fun. But what we were our response was pretty remarkable, I thought, and a lot of it was just because we have a pretty mature incident response process, and as well as inventory. So what we did right at the get-go of figuring out this, we knew the problem set, right, and we knew the fix. The problem is it was a very manual fix. We separated it out into how many of our factories are up and are able to produce, how many of our critical applications are up and able to produce, and then the desktops for employees. We kind of split them into those three categories and instantly created basically a tracking of what percentage of each of those was up, and worked on each of them with work streams. So you can imagine being a global company, that was a very difficult task of having people in Israel and Bangladesh getting our factories basically up and working on manual workarounds. But because we had a very coordinated and I would say, coordinated and collaborative response, we were able to get basically all of our factories up within about 8 hours, which was pretty amazing. And we had a lot of accolades from our
totally
CEO, our overall team. There was cleanup afterwards, right, the mop up, but it was really because we had gone through a number of incident response exercises in the past. We had a good collaborative team, and we were able to do that. But it really did it highlighted so many things, right? Like, first off, I mean, it just came out today that kind of the RCA that CrowdStrike did around, they didn't really have rings of deployment, where basically had this gone out even just to a limited set of users, they would have saw the impact and been able to stop it. So that was one thing. And I mean, most companies have learned that over time anyways, right? Like when we do our software patching for Microsoft, we do rings, right? Like we start off with one group, then expand it, and then expand it further. So I think that was one learning that they should have already had, I felt. Another one is really just how we're all dependent upon a lot of these software vendors, right? And it may not even just be a vulnerability. It could, this time it was a mistaken push, right? But it could have been an attack, right? SolarWinds was basically the same thing, right? It's part of intricate part of your operating system that was doing support. I mean, fortunately, we're not a SolarWinds and weren't impacted by that, but just all of these main vendors that we rely on, just how intricate they are into not just our networks, but into society now, right? Like you can take down, I mean, Delta is still recovering. You can take down a whole society through our via cybersecurity, and just how relevant our industry is now, right? I mean, it's most people haven't heard of CrowdStrike until last week. Obviously, most people on this call had, but it really does just highlight the importance of cybersecurity, not just in defense, but in our resiliency and the quality of the products that are out there.
Jeremy, I wonder, I have a question for you, just out of curiosity. So, I mean, the fact that you were able to like get back and get back up in like 8 hours, I think is honestly astonishing. I mean, I had, so disclaimer, my wife works for CrowdStrike. She's the head of product, one of the product lines there, and her team went to customers basically to help restart computers, although they are developers and product people, but everyone pitched in, which is amazing in my opinion. But it still took a couple of days, and Israel is a small country, so everybody are in a half an hour drive away from all of the customers here out in Israel. And I wonder, like this probably, as you said, you were well practiced in incident response. Connecting back to the vulnerability management problem, it happens where we have not always, but once in a while, these extremely dangerous vulnerabilities, like the OpenSSH vulnerability recently, or Log4j a year and a half ago. Were you able to remediate threats like that? It's not an incident, there are no attackers, nothing is down, but there is something that poses such a huge risk to the environment. Were you able to push the organization to act in the same way, or you hit constraints and hurdles versus obviously downtime or attacks that are happening? How do you manage these type of quasi incidents that are not really incidents, are waiting to come in that manner?
So you're talking about more the innovative approaches, outside of renaming the vulnerability management team to exposure management team, which I think is awesome, but kind of just, transforming this across the board. So yeah, Jeremy, I'd love to get your perspective here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say depending upon the situation, we've had varying levels of success, right? I mean, Log4j, I think we did pretty well in terms of discovering where we had that vulnerability. One of the big issues that we've had, and we're working on kind of looking at solutions like Vulcan right now, which is interesting timing, is really not just identification, but really the assignment and the accountability, right? Like that's really key. Is you have all these stakeholders, different application teams, we have operations teams, so getting it in their hands, making sure that they're accountable for it, that it's resolved, and tracking that. So like that has become like our way of, and that's really a focus of ours right now, is to do that better, because it's been somewhat manual in the past, right? Like you reach out, you know who to reach out to, but you don't necessarily have great tracking mechanisms that isn't integrated with our ServiceNow or ticketing system, but really going to that next level where we can have more of an automated response to vulnerability management, as well as exposures, right? Because they're not just vulnerabilities anymore. And I think that's Nirvana, right? Like we have everything automated, but even to get to just using a system rather than spreadsheets is kind of our goal. But it has been a challenge. I mean, we have varying levels of success depending upon our ability. I would say one thing that we have done much better. We do have like a chasm tool where we're able to see all of our assets and understand from various different sources. And for those of you who don't know what chasm is, it's cybersecurity. Maybe you probably know that the term.
Asset and attack surface. I'm lost between all these acronyms, but I think it's a cyber security, asset and attack surface management.
Yeah, but basically something that has the ability to get all your asset data and normalize it from various different sources. And we have one of those. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we have one of those, and that's really allowed us to at least identify where we have these issues and very quickly. From both the unknown and known. So we do have something that kind of sniffs our network and looks for the unknown as well. So that's done a lot to at least, you have to know what you have in order to detect it. And that's gotten us there. Next step is, okay, now you have that issue. How do you get it in the right hands and prioritize it correctly? And that's where our main focus is right now.
Yeah. That's a good segue to really kind of identifying the real risk signals that are out there. And, kind of getting through the noise, because a lot of the tasks that you just referenced were very manually oriented. So Yaniv, I'd love to kind of hear how you're seeing from your customers that you're helping them get through this noise, a lot of the manual nature, so that they can kind of just, set aside what's just a distraction and focus on the real threats that are out there. And that's, I'd love to kind of get Jeremy's perspective here, because we're talking about ROI and cybersecurity tools and technologies, which is a kind of a novel thought to begin with. But what we're kind of working around with our conversation is these actually do generate ROIs because it's keeping us up and running. Some of the mitigation things that you just did, Jeremy, got you back up and running in 8 hours. As compared to, I know, totally different industries, but as a million-mile, almost 2 million mile on Delta, I had to fly Southwest yesterday. So I'm hoping I get to fly Delta home tonight. And I had to drive back from where I was last week, overall. So your customers do matter, but, the advanced technologies that are out there and how to show an ROI, because that is a demonstratable type of ROI from when you're looking at the advanced technologies and procedures here. So I'm going to have Yaniv go first, and then Jeremy kind of piggyback off of what he says.
So I'll say this. When you look at this program, and when we work with customers on this program, we try to always divide and conquer, because it's very, very, very complicated. There are so many things that are honestly broken in these programs today, from the way we sense, the way we score, lack of unification between the sensing tools that we have, all the way to the agreements that we have made with our counterparts in IT, development, and so on, that not necessarily align with our goals, because we are always dependent on others. And I would even jump on that and say, there is a question here in the chat about PCI 4.01 and the fact that it basically forces everyone who wants to be in compliance to remediate critical and high vulnerabilities within 30 days. And then now it comes to a point where how do we manage the data that we have in a way that is meaningful? How do we align it to a risk framework? And what we need to understand is that risk frameworks are subjective and contextual. They are not objective today in the market. What is deemed as critical or high is what the organization, the enterprise, deems as critical or high, which is a relieving factor to a certain extent for us as an industry. So let's think about risk for a moment. Risk is simple. It's likelihood of something happening and the impact of it happening. Let's again jump to the CrowdStrike. How likely it is that a CrowdStrike agent will crash every second IT piece in the world, and what will be the impact? It's very unlikely. The impact would be very high. Here is the risk for that matter. And still, it happened. Same goes for vulnerabilities. When we look at vulnerabilities on different kinds, and what I really liked about what Jeremy said, it's not only CVEs today, it's misconfigurations in the cloud, it's computers that had not rotated their password for the past 6 months. There'd be a lot of different exposures. I really like the word exposures for that matter. And what we do first is we help our organizations, the organizations we work with, to even understand how they define risk. What is likely in their environment? What is impactful in their environment? Where is this data lies? Most of this data, for example, an impact of an attack or of a breach is not something that information security holds. It's something that is found, bless you, something that is found in other realms of responsibility for other teams. And we also need to retrieve this data, fuse it with the data itself. There is a very large data play. We need to organize the mess and make something out of it. And then on top of it, once we have the data, the impact, we can calculate the risk from our perspective. Then we can start applying the business agreements. And I think you've heard me say this a lot of times, Marci. This is a very complex program, but solving problems in it, or to solve problems in it, you need to use simple concepts. So one simple concept, for example, is SLAs. SLA is an amazing concept because what you do is by applying SLAs on different risk levels, you have the ability to translate your risk appetite into actions. When I say, or when PCI 4.10 says, you need to fix vulnerabilities that are highs and criticals in this environment within 30 days. What the PCI organization says is that we are willing to live with the risk of critical and high vulnerabilities for 30 days. After 30 days, this risk is not acceptable anymore. When we apply the same logic in the organization, we say we are willing to live with critical vulnerabilities for X number of days, high vulnerabilities for 2X, medium vulnerabilities for 5X, whatever it is. We basically tell ourselves what is our tolerance. And then we can start measuring things in a more qualitative way. For example, how many vulnerabilities are breaching our SLA? This is a qualitative metric that can say what are the things that are breaching our appetite based on our own subjective matrix. And this helps a lot both with assessors and assessments, as well as it helps start communicating on the things that matters most. Because the moment we define frameworks, the moment we define business agreements with organizations, and the moment we can apply this logic is the moment where we're starting to gain trust. And the one thing that was lost, I think, in the 20 years we're running vulnerability management programs in the old way is trust. We've been, let's be honest, sending garbage data in the form of email blasts or ticket blasts to our counterparts and just expecting them to do something with it. And it's not that we did it on purpose. It's that this program was not in the focus. 10 years ago, we were told, stop doing prevention, do only the detection and response 15 years ago. And then Equifax happened and we found out, okay, this is not how this thing works. We have to continue and do the basics. The basics are the most important thing. And now we're relearning how to drive these programs effectively. And I just find it, again, I find the process agreements as the core. And then whatever technology, either technology like Vulcan, CASM technology, which are a part of what I deem as continuous threat and exposure management, or something you built in-house, which also might be for some organizations the best option. All of them are there to apply process and to drive process, not the other way around. You'll buy a technology without the process, it's going to be vaporware. You're not going to use it, unfortunately. I don't know if Jeremy agrees. I see you nodding, but I'd love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of the PCI, the way that they're thinking of this, and I just think about critical and high, like critical and high CVEs. I mean, that's what they're getting at, but it's kind of old way of thinking, right? Like, okay, you have a PCI scope, you have I mean, obviously you want to limit your scope, so you have as few servers in that environment as possible and scope it just to that. But if you have a non-internet facing system that is completely isolated, and why mandate that has to be done in 30 days, right? Like the likelihood of impact is very low, and the prioritization and the criticality actually isn't critical or high because the attack path to get to it is very low. So I think that even PCI is, I mean, yes, they have to have mandates and ways of enforcing security, but I think they're even thinking of it in the old way. Like what we really should start looking at is like, what is that attack path that would impact that system, and looking at how can that be exploited, and then prioritize it based upon the actual risk. I mean, it's tough though, right? Like it's not an easy thing to do. And I think that's where I really like to see exposure management go and I think it's a little bit easier in some of these new cloud tools to do that. where they can really look at what is internet facing. Is there an attack path to get to that system, and is that exposure actually exploitable? I think internal systems, that's much more difficult, and they're really there's a lot of companies trying to solve that problem today. So linking the external attack surface area management, the internal attack surface area management, and telling you what is your real exposure, rather than just spitting out a bunch of CVEs that say that they're critical, and they may not actually, you may have compensating controls that can cover that. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it, is really looking at it more holistically as like, what do we need to focus on, because it's an actual risk rather than just the CVE score that is high or critical. And
I think
that's
yeah.
So I'd like to dive into a little bit around your security operation teams out there, because they're the ones kind of bearing the brunt of a lot of this, and they're going down sometimes some rabbit holes, and again, those conflicting tasks, as well as just the lack of prioritization or direction that some of them get because of the conflicting information across the board. So is there a way for us to kind of really instill the right processes with this advanced technology, maybe augment some of it with AI, to help us really combat the threat landscape that's out there? And then there's a feeling of accomplishment, because that's one of the things I see across the board is, we have a huge win that you just gave an example, Jeremy, of 8 hours up and running after one of the world's largest outage to present day. But not everyone has those super wins every single day. I mean, there's a lot of mundane things that happen that are still really important. And morale for our security operations team when they have these wins is just really essential overall when we're leveraging the advanced technology. I'd love to get your perspective on that, because I love to think about the teams out there that are really in our front lines.
Yeah, and I'm very fortunate to have an amazing team. As you heard, we were able.
That's why you won last year.
not just in our security, but our operations team, and the partnership that we have between our security operations and our larger IT team, I think really allowed us to recover well. But yeah, the security operations, we've been very fortunate. I mean, I know there's a lot of turnover in companies. In the cybersecurity space, we have had very, very little over the years. And a lot of it has been not focusing on finding talent that is already completely trained, but even looking at people in other departments who are smart and wanting to learn about security, and leveraging, knowing that they're smart people and getting them into cybersecurity. So I know we hear a lot about just the lack of resources in the IAT security space, and I don't think we're thinking about it the right way. I think that there's lots of opportunities and people who want to get in this industry, and if you're a smart person, you can learn. And I think the morale of the team, I mean, it really comes. We have a great corporate culture overall, and that kind of goes down through our IT organization and into my team, and a lot of it is just making sure that people know that they're respected, making sure that they are awarded, and even in this last incident with CrowdStrike, our CEO sent out an email to all of those who participated in it, just as a thank you. So it's those small things that really matter. In terms of, yeah, go ahead.
Jeremy, you know that these programs, I hear a lot from a lot of, especially like people who are handling exposure risk, which could be vulnerability management or application security. They say, unlike a lot of other programs, this program has very little glory in it. Not a lot of glory in patching and fixing vulnerabilities. How do you handle that? How do you empower them in their day-to-day? How do you make sure they're happy, they feel rewarded, they feel that what they do matter?
Yeah, that is a problem, right? Because there's no love in patching a system. The thing that's going to happen is it's either gonna work and there's going to be nothing, or it's going to go down because you patched it, right? And very few times will if you don't do it, there'll be an issue, but it's hard to prove a negative, right? So for us, it's less about. I mean, yes, it's about the whole culture around security within the company, of really enforcing that it's everyone's responsibility, and this is part of your job, just as development is, right? Make sure that what we do is, and the why. I think that's the most important piece, is like, if you can't cry wolf, you got to show them the why you're doing this, what impact it could have if it's not done. And then really holding people accountable too. Accountability is huge, like in vulnerability management overall. Because if you just send a bunch of emails and hope it gets done, it's not going to get done because of all what you just described. There's no love in it, right? But it's critical. So being able to hold people accountable, have metrics around it, report it up to our executives, escalate when things aren't getting done. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of it's just people and influence, right?
Well, let's sort of talk a little bit more about, many of us are still being asked to do more with less, and really measure some of this overall, because we're wanting to talk a little bit about the ROI of our cybersecurity investments. And I know we're giving a lot of great anecdotal stories here for everybody joining us today, but how are we able to really measure that return on investment? Obviously, morale is huge, the ability to mitigate the downtime, to thwart the different threats out there. But how, some of us, when we go to our boards and we go to our leadership teams and we're looking to make these different investments, like, didn't we just buy something like this like last year? And you're like, no, it's different. But overall, we're again, because of the challenging economy out there for some companies and industries, we're being asked again for that scrutiny of more, less. So I'm going to start with you, Jeremy. Just how are you kind of articulating that overall?
Yeah, that's a good question, Marci. And I have a trouble with ROI, right? It's very hard you always end up with, it could lead to a ransomware attack that could impact the company at $30 million, and therefore you should make the investment on everything. What we've done is a number of things in terms of kind of filtering where we should make investments. One is obviously leveraging past incidents and learnings from those of where we should focus our efforts. We do a maturity assessment every year, and that looks at various different areas within our cybersecurity program, where we're more mature, where we're not, against other companies. Obviously, the attackers don't care much about our maturity assessments, but it does give us one level of input. Penetration tests, obviously, where we were able to see things, great. Where we need to improve and have better focus, that also empowers kind of our investments for the future. And then we have an overall, I know it's a bit of a marketing term, but zero trust program, where we're basically looking to redo our whole architecture of our network to limit our blast radius and focus on really ensuring that we have a more zero trust model, so that everything from users are identified and contextual access is done, and segmentation to the level that's still manageable. So those are really kind of the main feeds to our overall cybersecurity program and where we focus. But from an ROI perspective on each tool, I wish we were there, but unfortunately, like, it's not something that I've been able to accomplish within my team.
Yeah, I think that in some cases, the discussion around ROI for some businesses, I would say, can be a bit more explicit and indirect. So, for example, for us, we sell to very large enterprises and we sell software. We need to be compliant with certain compliant measurements to do that. In order to do that, we have to invest in security, and it ties directly to revenue. I think that wherever, in whichever industry, you have the ability to tie the investment into the doors that are being opened by being compliant, which, by the way, I personally don't really like, because it takes the edge out of the real cause of everything we do. There is ideology in cybersecurity. There is something more than just let's do more business. But sometimes we are part of businesses. It's what we do. It's how we are. Security is very similar to insurance to a certain extent. How do you calculate ROI on insurance? It's also a very, very big ask, but insurers are not being asked that, because, again, usually insurance is driven by regulation. You are putting director's insurance or whatever, and because regulators forces you to do that, sometimes even without any doors that are being opened. This is one of the long lasting, as a vendor, one of the long lasting questions we ask ourselves and try to justify. And I have to say that every time we come with an answer, it's always it's always unfortunately, a common understanding that we are finding reasons to justify the ideology with things that are maybe lower than ideology. It could be, we're going to save, we're going to automate more tasks, so we're going to save more time, and time is money, which is correct. But I mean, between us here in this closed forum, we all know like how real it is, because the endless amount of tasks that are out there, done or not done, are still costing the organization money by doing them even through a proxy. Sometimes we see realities where we can displace these existing tools, or we can help reduce overlap between tools, which has some more ROI justification. But also here, it's more of allocating budgets from one place to another, because we cost money as well, versus saving money or making money. I think this is the conundrum of our industry. For somehow, despite the fact that our industry, in most cases, does not really generate revenue or does not really save money, it still has the ability to grow, and it still has the ability to grow dramatically. This is one of the most, fastest growing, heavy in investment industries out there. And I do think that, eventually in the bottom line, by the way, 10, 15 years ago, I think it was FUD. FUD was the driver. I don't think FUD is the driver today. I think today the driver is, we were able to build ourselves as an industry where the driver is actually making sure that we are safe, also defending brand equity to a certain extent, and in some levels. And I will say, to the event I was in Atlanta, one of the teams presented for the awards talked about how they are measuring the impact of their security, security center, public security center, on the actual business they are making, when they're involved, how quick are deals when security teams are involved, and so on. And to me, it was enlightening, because there are ways to still connect, or innovative ways to connect the actual impact of security on driving business faster. But this is unfortunately the rarer case. Like the more regular cases, justification of it, just like we justify insurance, which is still.
Not to cut you short, but I know that we do have some Q&A questions, and we're running out of time.
Yes, we have a lot of questions coming in, and I want to make sure we answer as many as possible. But I'm an old lady; I need my reader, so bear with me. All right, let's try to answer as many as possible. So we'll do them rapid fire, okay? So we've got new PCI 401 demand critical and high vulnerabilities to be remediated in 30 days. And these requirements put a lot to orgs because of resource constraints. And how many are critical and high vulnerabilities exist? Is there a better way to approach it? I know you kind of touched on it, Yaniv, during the beginning of the thing, but can we just kind of summarize that real quick?
Yeah, there are also two follow-ups to that question. Do you want to also read them from the same?
No, let's go ahead and answer that one there. So
yeah, so as I said, critical and highs are contextual, and specifically in PCI environments, you can also scope them very specifically to reduce the noise. There's still a very large amount, but the right way to approach PCI, in our opinion, is to scope specifically what are the PCI assets. We can also help with technology to do that, and then define even more specifically what do we deem as critical and high subjectively within our organization on our PCI environment. And this will, there is no magic. There's not that it's not that the number will drop. It won't drop. It might drop in 90%. I hope. But I wouldn't deem so. And then, yes, if the organization, talking about connection to business and ROI, if we want to be PCI compliant, we have to fix these things. So it's usually one blow. You have to do it one time, and then continuously try and approach it with the SLA. I think that the tighter you scope, and the tighter the subjectivity of the score you're applying to your business is, the more likely is that the load of vulnerabilities will be lower. I don't know, Jeremy, if you have anything to add about that.
No, I think we covered it already.
Yeah, we covered that really well. So let's go to James Huddleston's questions. How do you get past the ranking of vulnerabilities and perception of immediate remediation, regardless of the system involved, and the impact metrics which may force the issue? He also added that he agrees with the risk assignment, but the massive job can be very subjective unless you have a clear methodology for its assignment and determination. So how are we able to deal with the ranking of this?
Yeah, I would say, most critical assets, what their impact to your organization would be, if they're internet exposed. So you just need to come up with a matrix of how to risk rank it yourself and not just rely on CVEs.
Yeah, likelihood is one part, and again, the other part would be try to associate impact to the best extent possible. This is the harder part because it's again very contextual. Exploitability is technical; it's almost binary, external facing or not. Is there public exploit or not, and so on. A machine almost can do it. Some machines can do it, some not. So because of platforms like ours, the subjective part is usually where the impact comes, and we would even deem that it's where the vast majority of the weight should be, where your crown jewels are. Ideally, I don't want to see critical vulnerabilities on things that are not crown jewels, because the impact or the risk would be never as high as a crown jewel critical might bring upon you.
And I think the next question did get answered with your comment on the previous question. So let's just jump into the final question, which is their industry data can give clarity on how critical vulnerability would be exploited per CVE, CWE, and will that give the dev team better visibility on the code that needs to be fixed? That's a really great question. I know we didn't really cover a lot on DevOps here, but I'd love to just have a snippet on that one.
Yeah, so there are two things I would recommend. So there are services, us included, where we analyze what we call exploit maturity and what actual level of exploitability is associated to this particular CVE. It's not necessarily ties directly to criticality, because you can define criticality subjectively. You can say that exploitable vulnerability in a certain maturity level will always be deemed critical, and some exploit level will not be deemed critical. This is one. So there are feeds and there are threat intelligence feeds and people who analyzes the actual maturity of the exploit. There are also different parameters like EPSS, the likelihood for exploitability, that can give some kind of signal to what is actually critical or not. So one method would be to say a vulnerability cannot be critical if its EPSS is not more than 70% or 80% or whatever it is. On the CWE part, the most effective thing I have seen is to try and map CWEs into MITRE attack tactics and techniques. And this alludes to what Jeremy said on attack paths prior. If we have the ability to associate the vulnerability to an attack vector, then we have also the ability to then associate the impact of this particular vulnerability within an attacker. So we can, for example, again, services like ours, some of them can go in and take a vulnerability and say, based on its CWE, it allows an attacker to laterally move in your network, or it allows an attacker to exfiltrate data, which is very different than a vulnerability that allows an attacker to just escalate privileges for that matter, which is a tool versus a means versus an end. And I think those small nuances of adding further context to CVE, CW, and other parameters that are related, so OWASP indicators, for example, as well, can give you better indications on what kind of signals and context you can do to influence the score, and by that influence the SLA, and by that give the developers the guidance on what is the most critical things to accomplish. I would give one more insight on the other side. One of the things that we recommend customers to do is not only look at the vulnerability separately, but actually look at actions they can take. So in the patching world, it's very clear, do one update to Windows or one kernel update to Linux, fix a lot of different vulnerabilities. This might take a long time, but it might be that this long time is still better and more effective than fixing each and every one, hot patching each and every one separately. Same goes with compensating controls. Apply a certain control that will block a lot of different exploitability methods and at least mitigate the vulnerability until you get there. So this is another angle of how to prioritize vulnerabilities. Go from the action to the impact versus the vulnerability to the action.
Well, wonderful. You guys are amazing. You're a wealth of knowledge. I want to say thank you to Yaniv and Jeremy for being with us today. I think our conversation was very timely and awesome. We'd love to get everybody's feedback. There is a survey in the chat window. And just as a reminder, your CISSP certification, your CPE credits, we're able to provide verification that you were here. Just fill out that survey and let us know that you need that verification. A couple of announcements before we jump off. We have our ISE Central West nominations open, and we're excited that we have Jeremy here. He was our winner last year. We will be in Dallas on October 16th, and look forward to connecting, collaborating, and celebrating with all the great security executives and project teams out there. And I think with everything that is going on out there. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to really celebrate all the great work that's happening across the board. And if you're going to be out at Black Hat next week, we'd love for you, or 2 weeks, not coming up. We'd love to have you join us at our ISE VIP private dinner. We're going to be talking about this topic, maximizing cyber ROI with exposure risk management, on a more casual level at our dinner. But join us on Monday, August 5th. We also do have a couple other ISE VIP programs out there. If you're coming out at a different time frame, do let us know. We'd love to, again, see you out there in Las Vegas. And then I really do encourage you to get in touch with our friends over here at Vulcan Cyber. You can get in touch with Wes Wharton, who's the head of sales for Americas, and he is able to be reached at wes.wharton, that's WHARTON, at Vulcan.io. And we've got Lauren Sues, also Director of Inside Sales and Account Development, and that's Lauren, LOREN .Sues, SUESS, at Vulcan, VULCAN.io. And you can also just check out our event calendar and all the things that we have coming up with the QR code there. And again, just a reminder to fill out that survey to get your CPEs. We look forward to seeing you hopefully in Las Vegas and joining us at ISE Central West or an ISE private dinner near you. I want to say again, a special thank you to Vulcan Cyber for being with us today. And a very special thank you to Jeremy and Yaniv for sharing their insights and perspectives. Overall, this is a very, again, timely conversation, and we really appreciate the perspectives and insights that you were able to share with us today. Well, thank you for everyone joining us today. It was a great afternoon. And for Yaniv, he still has 2 more meetings to go at Tel Aviv time. So hopefully you get to bed tonight. And everyone have a wonderful afternoon. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.